Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Boeing 757, proceed on the runway.
757.
Boeing planes have been in the news the past few years for all the wrong reasons. However, there is one plane they got right on the first shot. Of course, I'm talking about the iconic 757. The 757 has stood the test of time and then some. With its protracted lean frame and its long trim stems, as well as an oversized pair of impressive power plants, she has also been described as downright sexy. Yeah, that's right, I said she. And even after 40 years and with literally tons of new competition in the skies, she is still flying strong and taking on all comers. That's why the history of the Boeing 757 is next on Maximus. According to Boeing's website, the first 757 rolled out of the Renton, Washington factory in 1982. Now, almost 40 years later, the 757 is still a workhorse of the sky, moving passengers and freight to points all over the globe. It has often been compared to a finely tuned sports car for the way it handles, and in my opinion, the 757 is nearly a perfect airplane. Back in the 1970s, while most of the world was sporting platform shoes and coming down with Saturday night fever, the Boeing Corporation was busy giving birth to the 757. Boeing's goal was to design a modern, more efficient version of its tri-engine 727. They initially proposed a stretched and modified 727-300, then Boeing dropped that idea in favor of a completely new design, initially dubbed the 7N7. Boeing briefly considered making the 7N7 a wide-body with 7 across 232 seating, but decided it was too close in design to another emerging product, the 7X7. At the same time Boeing was developing the 757, they were also developing a wide-body replacement for the 707, which at the time they dubbed the 7X7. That plane would eventually go on to become Boeing's new wide-body variant, the 767. Consequently, Boeing abandoned the idea of making the 757 a wide-body and settled on a traditional 6-across single aisle with a seating capacity of 170 passengers. Since the 7N7 and 7X7 were created in the same aviational womb, both shared the same technological DNA in advances in propulsion, aerodynamics, avionics, and materials. Additionally, the new sibling airliners were the first in commercial aviation to premiere computerized glass avionics on the flight deck. The 757 and 767 cockpits are nearly identical, so as an added bonus, pilots could easily qualify to fly both. The sister planes entered service within months of each other in 1982. Airlines were slow to warm to the 757 at first, but however by the end of the decade, sales of the 757 were brisk and remained that way through the 90s. Unfortunately for the 757, the events of 9/11 would play a part in the hastening of the beginning of the end for the type. In late 2003, Boeing decided to end the 757 production because the increased capabilities of the newest 737s and the soon-to-be produced 787 would fulfill the 757's market needs. On March 20th, 1991, in a display of the 757's amazing capabilities, especially in high, dry climates, a 757 powered by only one of its engines took off from Gangar Airport in Tibet. The 757 took a lap around the mountainous region in the skies above the Tibetan Plateau, then casually landed at the 11,621-foot-high runway. The airplane performed perfectly, even though the airfield was in a box canyon surrounded by jagged peaks of more than 16,500 feet high. Eastern Airlines operated the first commercial 757 flight on January 1, 1983, on the Atlanta to Tampa route. Then on February 9th of 1983, British Airways began using the aircraft for London to Belfast shuttle services, where it replaced the Hawker Siddeley Trident 3B Trijets. Soon, the frame was stretched into what would become the 757-200, which entered service with Eastern Airlines in 1983. The 757-200PF was next in a production cargo version, and it entered service with UPS Airlines in 1987. After that, Boeing followed with the 757-200M Combi, which was capable of carrying both cargo and passengers. And finally, there was the Dash 300, the stretch version of the 757. Boeing stretched the fuselage to infinity and beyond, threw in an additional pair of exits behind the wing, and by the time they were done, you could seat 275 passengers as Condor Air did, thus making the 757-300 the longest single-aisle twin-engine jet ever produced. So long, in fact, the 757-300 features a retractable tail skid on its aft fuselage to avoid tail strikes. Despite being popular with airlines, however, the 757-300 was largely a disappointment for Boeing. Just 55 airframes were built. However, all of those remain in commercial service today, with United and Delta Airlines as well as Iceland Air, Thomas Cook, Condor, and Arica Israel Airlines. Originally, the 757 was designed for short to medium routes, but surprisingly it found its sweet spot flying transcontinental, intercontinental, and as a secondary market transatlantic hauler. The 757 was one of the early aircraft to be awarded the ETOP certification, ETOP standing for Extended Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. With just under 77,000 pounds of fuel capacity, 11,489 gallons, maximum range is a bit over 4,000 nautical miles, sufficient to connect most of Western Europe with the US East Coast. The plane's real bread and butter, however, is its ability to make the 2,200 nautical mile transcontinental flight from New York to Los Angeles with a full load of passengers and cargo and still take off from a short strip and climb straight to 35,000 feet. Till this day, no other plane can do that, neither the A321 nor the 737-900ER, though the airlines have tried. That's why the 757 is still a sexy damn plane after all these years. So exactly why are its customers so loyal? Is the 757 that good? To get some answers, back in 2016, Business Insider spoke with author and Boeing 757 pilot Patrick Smith about the plane. There's no denying the 757 is an old plane that was designed in the late 70s, but the versatility of the plane is remarkable and unmatched, Smith, the author of the book Cockpit Confidential, said. It's profitable on both short-haul domestic as well as transatlantic routes. Boeing is trying to push the 737 as a viable 757 replacement, Smith said. In some respects it can, and in some respects it can't. For instance, the 737 simply isn't capable of the same kind of engine performance as the 757. According to Smith, the 737 falls way short of the 757 in terms of runway performance. The 737 requires a much higher takeoff speed and much more runway to get off the ground. Furthermore, the 757 can comfortably climb straight to its cruising altitude. The 737 requires a step climb procedure that calls for the plane to climb to a certain altitude and burn off some fuel to lighten the load before climbing to a higher altitude. Runway performance matters when it comes to the type of flying the 757 and the 737 are asked to perform, especially transcontinental or oceanic flights with a full payload out of smaller secondary airports. The 737 falls short when you're trying to fly at longer hauls, such as coast to coast. It can do it, but not by much, Smith said. In addition, when it comes to flying across the Atlantic, there's a concern in the winter when there are ferocious headwinds that the 737 may need to stop for fuel. The reality is that Smith believes the Boeing 737 is a good plane, but it's being asked to take on a mission the design wasn't meant to perform. Somewhere along the way, had Boeing just re-engined the 757 with a new cockpit and new internal systems, it could have been a big hit. With that said, the 757 isn't a perfect plane. It's a 6-across seating narrow body that's long and thin, Smith said, and for passengers it can take a long time to board and disembark. In addition, the 757's cockpit is pretty old-fashioned when compared to the modern airliners, such as the 737 MAX. The controls of the 757 are also much heavier for pilots than its sibling, the 767. And finally, the Boeing 757 leaves a massive amount of wake turbulence as it flies, forcing air traffic controllers to keep other planes far away from passing 757s. No one really knows why, but the 757 has really strong wake turbulence, he said. The early 757s had worse wake turbulence than the 747, although Smith added that the addition of winglets on later 757s have greatly reduced the wake turbulence. On April 27th of 2005, Boeing concluded the remarkable 23-year run of the 757 passenger airplane by delivering the final unit to Shanghai Airlines. The airplane was the 1050th Boeing 757 produced. Hoo boy, I don't know about you, but I need a cigarette. That is just one sexy damn plane. You know what? I'm so aviationally aroused right now, I'm going to break some news here. The 757 isn't one of my favorite planes. It is my favorite plane. Listening to pilot Patrick Smith talk about the 757, you could see how some think it is truly the Ferrari of the skies. You know, it really is a shame that Boeing is such a mess right now, because their new mid-sized option is staring them right in the face. It's the 757. It's perfect for this. Throw in some new Gen X style engines, composite wings, modern avionics, and you're good for another 40 years. Well, that's what I think. What are your thoughts on the 757? Leave comments down below, and as always, don't forget to subscribe and like, share, and ring the bell so you can be notified of content whenever we release new videos. And until next time, remember, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you in the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.